Welcome everybody to this Lunch and Learn. I am Becca. I'm one of the maintainers at Virtual Coffee, and Ayu is here with me today. We are going to be talking about becoming a maintainer. So right now at Virtual Coffee, our monthly challenge is Preptember. And so we're getting ready for Hacktoberfest, which is a month-long challenge to get involved in open source. And so we really want to take this time to prepare contributors and maintainers as they move forward and as we move towards Hacktoberfest. So as we do this, we ask that everybody abide by the code of conduct and that we respect each other. We're going to be answering questions today, and we're going to be using the open source education path with OpenSauce as our framework. Ayu and I both worked on this course together, and we'll drop the link in the chat to that as well. But I'm going to send it over to Ayu if you want to do an intro of yourself, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
So, hi everyone. I'm really excited to be here for the Preptember, and I am a documentation and monthly challenge here at the Virtual Coffee. I'm also a tech blogger, and yeah, I think that's all about me. Oh, I'm also based in the Netherlands.
All right, so I put the link in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I don't know why, but I always miss the share button and it's green, so I should not miss it, but I do. So this is the link, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about, so we have two paths here, intro to open source course and becoming a maintainer. So I think like both of these courses can help you if you are a contributor. If you need more context to what open source is and how open source works, you can go ahead and check that intro to open source course, but we're also going to be leading a workshop in that in 2 weeks from today. And I'm just gonna get us started off with becoming a maintainer. So just a little bit about being a maintainer and what that means. Ayu, do you want to talk about what it means to be a maintainer for an open source project?
Sure. I mean, being a maintainer of an open source project, we need to use like so many hats, right? Like we are, a guide and a feedback provider for the pull requests and for the contributors. And also we are the community nurturer. So becoming a maintainer, become a maintainer of an open source project, it's really, you can learn a lot from it. And there are like so many benefits of it, but also there are challenges of becoming a maintainer. So the benefits that I personally feel that I grow professionally, but also my communication is getting better, especially in a synchronous environment. And it also helped me, to know other developers and to learn from them, and to help other contributors that are just beginning with open source. And how about you, Becca?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yeah, I think that those are really great benefits of being a maintainer. I think like you also learn how to expand your network and to really build trust with other people. Being a clear communicator is a really important part of the job. And you'll find that as you improve in communication, your job often becomes easier as well, because you don't have to repeat your stuff, or people don't have to ask for clarification. So that's been really important for me. Actually, being a maintainer has helped me become a better contributor as well. It's allowed me to have more empathy for maintainers, to understand all of the different things that they have to do. And as Ayu said, there are definite challenges. Burnout is one of them. We see a lot of burnout in open source, and that's often because maintainers are wearing many hats. But I just want to give a shout out to Arthur Dolan, who's one of our members at Virtual Coffee, who does a talk about burnout. And I remember that I saw that talk live. And before I was going into a new job, actually, I think maybe I had just started it that week. And I asked Arthur, I'm like, okay, I started this new job. Like, how can I prevent burnout? Because I felt this before. And one of the things that he said was, you've got to set up the standard right now, set up what your boundaries are. And so we might get to this a little bit later, but one of the things that was really important for me is I have to turn off my GitHub notifications by 5 every night, because there were times I would like wake up at 2 in the morning and I would look at my phone. I'm like, oh no, there's a GitHub notification. I should respond to this person. Terrible boundaries. Don't recommend doing that. Like that will definitely lead to burnout. But also like recognizing, okay, these are my limits and I have to take a break or I need to ask for help, can really help to improve that. So setting up those boundaries now. I'll try and find Arthur's talk. I've shared it a million times, but it's always worth sharing. Um, and again, like dealing with loneliness, I think feeds into that. But lucky for us, we're part of.
I think we lose Becca there.
I think we did.
Understand your project and what you're going through becomes really important. And my internet is unstable. Awesome. If I freeze, you can just keep going. I'll try and fix it. But let's talk through some of the key responsibilities and expectations here. So when you set up your project, I once had a maintainer ask me, they're like, how do I get people to contribute to my project? And I looked at their open source project and they had no issues. And so it's going to be really hard to get people to contribute to your project if you have not written issues. And also if you haven't written clear issues. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But issues are a key part of the process. And so you'll have issues, bug reports, you'll have features, you'll have documentation updates, but issues are a way to track the progress that you're making. You want to tell them about what it means to triage an issue?
So to triage an issue means that you are reviewing the issues that are coming to your project. Like, for example, if someone report like a bug or someone says that, hey, it's really nice to have this feature in your project, and then you want to triage this issue, which means that you review the issues. Then you have to see, like, for example, if it's a bug issues, and you want to be able to reproduce the bugs and like to identify like what kind of bugs is it like a crucial bugs which can break like the whole application, or is it like a small or medium bugs that it can be postponed or giving some time to fix it. And then also for the feature requests, for example, like if someone say that it's nice to have this and that, and probably it's not what your project needs. And that's totally fine to say that, hey, you know what, this is like a great feature, but our project doesn't need this kind of feature at the moment. But thank you for, like your requests and stuff. So yeah, that's about the triaging issues.
And I would say one of the things that helps me most as a maintainer is when contributors come through and they verify a bug report. So they reproduce it, right? I think that sometimes you'll find there's been a number of times where I found a bug in the project that I'm working on. And it turns out it's a me problem. It's not an anybody else problem. Usually it has to do with some kind of Chrome extension that is blocking whatever I need to happen. But still file the bug report, and then somebody else can come and they can offer help with that. We'll talk about, I wonder if it makes more sense to talk about writing an issue right now since we're already there. I'm going to skip to that a little bit. We'll just kind of stick with issues and what that means. So Ayu talked about some different types of issues. So you have bugs, a critical bug, a small to medium bug, Features, oftentimes you'll find that contributors come and they might want a feature, but it doesn't fit with your plan. And so this is where communication comes into play in a really big way. You have to be able to really, I think, number one, listen to what they're saying. And number two, be able to communicate like, I really appreciate your contribution here, but it doesn't fit into our roadmap at this time. And if you have a roadmap, then it's a good time to introduce that. But I will say, in most of the projects I maintain, I don't have a roadmap. So like, please don't think that that's a necessary thing that you have to have. But labels are really helpful on issues to help contributors identify like, what should I be doing? Help wanted, accepting PRs. There are certainly times where you don't want to accept PRs from outside contributors. Maybe it's something that you need to work on yourself because you have in-depth knowledge or there's a particular way that you want to have it done for reasons. And so you'll add a label to that. So we're going to go over to the virtual coffee repository and just take a look. Oh, sorry, I had a cat jump on me. Not VC contributors, but virtual coffee. Here we go. So here are some open issues. And you'll see that you can label them in a way that makes sense for you. So I think GitHub comes with some standard labels, but you can add whatever labels that you want or that you need for your project. And so I think if you go to labels, no, that's not how you add a label. Oh, probably you click here. And then you can add a new label. And use whatever, again, works for you. So we have content here, needs triage. That means need some help from contributors, what the type is. And so we also, as part of making this a good issue experience for folks, we have issue templates. So Ayu, do you want to talk a little bit about issue templates? Or issue forms, rather. I always get it's issue forms and PR templates.
Yeah. I mean, like I don't know like how to say which one is form, which one is template. So yeah, so we have the issue template. Issue templates basically is like a template for contributors to write down their issue, and it's very helpful for them to guide them, like what kind of information do we want to have in an issue. Because without the template, they can write anything. For example, hey, I find a bug and that needs to be fixed. Okay, which kind of bug, how to reproduce the bug, etc. So with this template, we want to make sure that our project gets all the information that we can have so that we can triage the issue more carefully and, like to understand what's going on there.
Yeah, so you'll see here that issue templates are in a special folder in your repository. So you have a .github file, and then within there we have the issue file. And so we have different templates. Now, I will say that it is useful to copy and paste this from other repositories. This doesn't need to be something that you make up for yourself. I would say like take it and adapt it. If you want to give credit, like, hey, this is adapted from Virtual Coffee, which I think some of these we adapted from the forum repository. So I think that's one of the nice things about open source is that you can, people are really willing to share things, just give them a little bit of credit where it is due. So for us, this makes it much easier to sort through which issues are worth, no, not worth our time, but which issues we need to prioritize. So, for example, if we see a bug report, that's probably going to be pretty important. And this helps us to narrow things down. So is there an existing issue? This is important. This is like kind of for us, because one of the things that becomes challenging for a maintainer is it takes a long time to sort through all of the issues. And it's it's really nice if contributors take some time to make sure that that issue is not already there. Now, sometimes if you're contributing to a large project that has hundreds or thousands of issues, it can be really hard to try and track down one that relates. But at Virtual Coffee, we don't have that many open, so it's pretty easy just to skim through and say, like, is there already a bug report? So this is why we ask that. This asks to give more details, what you expect to happen. There have certainly been times, maybe you've been on a team that says, like, well, is that a bug or is that a feature? Sometimes it's not really clear. And so this makes sure that you can give the maintainers the information they need. Also, steps to reproduce, that's super important. If you can also ask them, so I don't think we specifically ask here, but having a bug reproduced as a video or a GIF is a really great way to really see what's happening. So I would recommend that if you have a bug report form, that you include a place for people to add that information, because it makes it so much easier to triage that issue. So are there any questions about issue forms? Okay. So we'll go back over here. So we talked about labels a little bit, documentation, spam issues. You might find that there is spam. I think it's important to mark something as spam, and I say this from a maintainer's perspective, because in general, when you're marking something spam, there are reports that are generated that show how much spam is being created in your project or in open source. Like that, there are different tools that you can use to track that information. And that's just generally helpful knowledge for open source to know, like, okay, there's a lot of spam, or we see a big pickup of that. So if you find that something's spammy, you can go ahead and feel free to add that. So the next thing, let's talk about pull request reviews, which I think is the next thing that we were talking about in becoming a maintainer. So reviewing pull requests is going to be a really important part of that job. Ayu, do you want to talk about what goes into reviewing a pull request?
Yeah, so basically when reviewing a pull request, you want to first of all read like the whole PR description, what kind of changes does the contributors made, and then if it's like a complete pull request, as in it covers like the whole issue, because sometimes also pull request is not finished. Like we need to fix like some things, but then it's not actually fixing like some other things that we requested in the issue. And then second of all, testing like is really important when reviewing a pull request. We want to make sure that like all the changes are good and work as expected. And sometimes we have like a deploy preview, right? And sometimes it works on deploy preview, but when we try it locally and it doesn't work, so you want to always like test the PR locally. So you can pull the branch of the PR and then test all the changes locally. And also, when there is a failing automated test, nowadays projects have like a test, an automated test. Like for example, here at Virtual Coffee, we also have deploy preview and such. And sometimes like it says that, oh, the check is failed. And we want to make sure that the contributors are aware of that and tell them that, hey, you have like a failing automated test here, and you want to check that out and like make all the tasks pass. And yeah, so I think that's for the review.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and show you an example of what Ayu is talking about here. Let's see if I can find one. Okay, so we have some automations that are set up that we can talk about a little bit later, but this is in the open source repository. So you can see we have a GitHub action that runs that congratulates people, but it also does some PR compliance checks here. So there's something that's missing that's necessary for this to get merged in. And so this lets them know you haven't referred to an issue and it needs to look like this in order for this to be accepted as a pull request. So you can set up these kind of automations to help you out. And again, we'll talk about these a little bit later. But this is some of the things that you're looking for as you're going through and you're checking what the pull request looks like. Okay, yeah. Oh, and we have the example here as well. So we use Netlify at Virtual Coffee as well, and there's a deploy preview, which is super helpful for checking things out. Let's see what else. Issue and pull requests. Now we'll go back to how to set up your project, I think, is useful. So we skipped around a little bit. We jumped forward with issues and pull requests, but I think it's useful to understand, like, okay, what are these things? Oh, you know what I forgot to talk about is the pull request template. So just like you can have an issue form, you can do something similar to make it easier to contribute to for your contributors to submit their pull requests. And so this again goes in your .github file, which is in the root of your repository, and you have a pull request template. So a template is different than a form because of how it looks. I don't know why there are not pull request forms. It would be much easier. So if you want to look at the how this looks like in the background, what this looks like in the background. It's a lot different than what the form looks like. So it gives you information here. You don't see this when the template is visible to the contributors, but it basically gives them directions for how to do things. It's a little bit harder to follow, and I know that some new contributors might have an issue with, like, I don't understand what's going on in this, and they'll just delete the whole thing. So I would say don't blame them. Unless you're used to it, it can be just strange to kind of look at. But you'll see, I don't know if I can open up a pull request right now, but I would say, again, this is like another way to power up your repository and make it easier for them to fulfill what you need from them. So what is the issue? What is the description? What is the approach they took? And at Virtual Coffee, we always make sure that everybody agrees to abide by the code of conduct. So that, again, is in that .github file in the root menu. So again, we skipped ahead a little bit just to kind of show you, like, this is part of the responsibilities. These are kind of like the big things that you're going to be working on. And depending on your project, everybody is going to have a different approach to things. You know, we've had projects where people are contributing resources. So it's been mostly Markdown. We've had projects where people are building a game. And so then it's very code focused. And so that will impact the way that you set things up. But everybody will have issues and everybody will have pull requests. Now, what else do you need to make something a good open source project? Ayu, why don't you talk about the README?
Okay, so first of all, a project needs to have a detailed README. What consists in the detailed README is the project title and the summary. So what's the project is all about. And then the brief instruction how to set up the project. So like how to install the project, and then the images of the app and code examples. And then you want to let folks know as well, like what kind of tech and tools that you use in the project, so they can, you know, like decide it if they want to contribute to your project, or they want to learn something from your project. And then you want to have a link to the contributing guidelines, and you want to have a code of conduct. And the code of conduct is really good And it's very, very important to make your project inclusive and also make the community around your project becoming a supportive and welcoming community. And then you want to have a link to the open source license as well, and a link to your community Discord, Slack, or GitHub discussions. And also it's important to understand that a project needs an open source license, which probably we will touch it later. Yeah. So I think that's all that you need to have in the README.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about all of these things, but I'll touch back on the code of conduct really quickly. When I started Virtual Coffee, I realized that this was something that we were going to continue to do beyond the pandemic. I reached out to a friend and I was like, hey, didn't mean to start a community. What do I need to do to kind of ensure the longevity? And the first thing that she said was, you need a code of conduct. And at that point, I wasn't really sure, like, why do I need a code of conduct? And it's always better to have one before you need it, because then it's something that you can refer back to. So, maybe you have a contributor that's being rude. And then you can point to that and say, like, hey, listen, this is not how we interact. Like, if you're going to interact like this, then this is not the place for you. And then you can refer to that thing. But it makes it much easier incidents like that, which hopefully you don't have to. But I would just emphasize that having that code of conduct is important. And I actually think when you set up a GitHub project now, they allow you to choose from different code of conduct templates, which is nice. So this is one of those things you don't have to come up with by yourself. You can see in the Virtual Coffee code of conduct, we attribute to the one that we primarily used. I can't remember what we used, and we adapted it based on Virtual Coffee and who we are. So there's a little bit of additions there, maybe a little bit of changes, but again, this is one of those things that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of good code of conducts out there. Feel free to use it and attribute it to that particular organization or code of conduct. Installation guides are really important if you are doing software or if you're using code for your project. And so letting the contributor know what is that process for running the project. And I always tell contributors it's very important. Read through the README, read through the contributing guide, and try and run that project. Because sometimes I am guilty of this myself. I think like, oh, I can do this just really quickly. I don't need to run it. And then I end up digging myself into a hole, realizing I should have run it. There were things there that I missed and that I could have avoided. So you want to give the contributor everything they need to succeed. Walk them. You don't necessarily have to walk them through forking a repository. You can provide a link to what that means, but take them through all of the things that they need to do. And I think like one of the best ways to test that is have somebody that's not you go through your installation guide and then run that thing. Because I know that, we've run into problems like somebody doesn't have the right version of Node installed, or they're using a particular operating system or something that doesn't work the way that we anticipated. So, if it works on your local machine, that's great, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone else that way too. All right, so here's open source software license. Ayu, do you want to chat about that?
Yeah, sure. So this is interesting that I found out like a year ago or something, that an open source project without a license cannot be considered as open source. That's very interesting because if you see, like I heard a lot of people saying that, hey, but the project is on GitHub and it's public, so it's open for contributions and such, because well, why you have to put it public? Otherwise you can have it private, right? But it's actually not like that. If you see here at the course, there on the quotes, that it comes from the legal side of open source, right? So making your GitHub project public is not the same as licensing your project. So making GitHub project public means that people can view and fork the project, but they may not distribute or do anything further rather than to view and to fork it. So you need to have a license for your project so that people can distribute and contribute to your project. And choosing a license, it's we have like some resources here, like how to choose a license, but mostly open source projects have an MIT license, right? And you can see like what these licenses are due in this one resource here, the TLDR legal, which I like because like it explained the license in plain English. So yeah.
And again, when you're setting this up in GitHub, they give you options for different licenses you can choose from. If you have more questions about that, we can answer it. There's just a lot that goes into choosing a license. I think I don't actually, MIT is one of the most popular ones. I know we're about to open source our VC contributors repo, and that's not what we used. We trying to think of what name of the license is. It's the same thing I think we use for this course. But it's more, what is it?
Common something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Creative Commons. That's what it's called. And that's generally I use that if there's like an educational aspect to the project. That's the one I use, but I am definitely not an expert in licenses, but I'll answer questions if you have them to the best of my ability, but these are some really great resources. We talked about the code of conduct, and then there's the project pledge, which we put at the beginning of the code of conduct. It's just kind of like, what do we want from this community or this project? Like, how do we want people to behave towards each other? And like, what are the expectations? As part of that, we set up project standards, and what can you expect? So if you do this thing, here are the consequences. So the next big thing is contributing guidelines. And I know that sometimes there's a little bit of confusion, like there's a README, but there's also a contributing guide. So Ayu, what's the difference?
Yeah, so contributing guidelines usually is more comprehensive. It's the guideline for the contributors, like how to, for example, how to contribute to your project, like from all the workflow, and then how to communicate, and then it will also consist the project setup instructions, and then, well, let me read this easier. And the guidelines for creating new issues, and then like back reports and feature requests, information about which issues are available for contributions, and so on. Usually on the README, when you have this kind of information put together in the README, and then the README will become long. And it's a little bit difficult for the contributors to understand, like to read like the whole things. So usually we want to put like some things in the like the more comprehensive ones in the contributing guidelines. But if it becomes larger, then you want to have like a documentation site to put like all these contribution guidelines.
Yeah, so this gives like a real detailed flow of the process, like you said. So issues, PRs, how to communicate with the maintainers of the project. For us at Virtual Coffee, we have a pretty thorough one. I think some people might think it's too thorough because they don't read it all the way through. But it's a valuable way to let people know, like, these are the expectations. So Have you read our code of conduct? Have you checked the existing issues in the discussion board? And so we have a table of conduct that's set up, table of contents. And again, like this is one of those things that you can go to Virtual Coffee if you're starting your own project, and you can take parts of this that work for your project because, you know, setting up a GitHub account, that's pretty standard. You don't have to have that in your contributing guidelines. For us, we have a lot of really new folks who are contributing, so we wanted to make sure that we gave them access to all the information that they needed in the contributing docs here. So it also talks about the types of contributions that we're looking for. If you want to pair up, again, these are not things that you have to have. So go through, check it out, see what works for you. Look at your favorite projects and see what their contributing guidelines are. But that can be a really great way to make sure that you're setting up your contributors for success and you're decreasing their dependence on you to get started. Okay, so we talked through a lot of stuff so far, and I want to pause for a minute and see if there are any questions.
I have a question. What are some common mistakes that you've seen new maintainers make when setting up like projects for the first time?
That's a good question. For me, the biggest ones are like missing the things that we just talked about. I think missing issue forms and PR templates because it doesn't seem like you would need those things, but it just makes your life so much easier if you have them from the very beginning and then your contributors work that into their flow. So I think that's really important. And also in that contributing guideline, walking through how do you communicate with the maintainer? So I find if you don't have a reference to that, people will find a way to DM you. And I can say from experience, you do not want people DMing you. You want them to respond in the issue or in a discussion. And again, like there's reasons why you just don't want all of those DMs. But the other side of that is that's kind of like anti-open source, right? Like you want to be communicating in the open because that provides knowledge and context for other contributors as well. So you like want to keep those conversations where everyone can see them and not take them in your DMs. So I would say like those are some of the big ones I've seen. Ayu, what about you?
For me, is the contributing guidelines because I see once I help someone, they want to have like an open source project, and then they have this README, which is great. But then they didn't put like the contributing guidelines, even on the README, like how to contribute to their project. So they didn't understand like why people like don't, you know, like creating an issue or things like that. And that's definitely one of the things that I said to them, like, I think that you need the contributing guidelines, and then like what Bekah said here as well, that having an issue template and PR templates in advance, that would be helpful, because I think the contributors also confuse like, how can I contribute? How can I, you know, like ask things, because there is no guidelines at all. That's from me.
All right. I think so we've
I'm
got
just letting you know, I dropped a
Okay.
link in the channel for choose a license, just to help anybody who was having because I don't understand licenses either. So I've used this site to kind of help me. So I thought I'd just share it. It's in the chat there for everyone.
All right, this is awesome. We'll also check this out and maybe add this to some of the stuff, resources that we have. So thank you.
Cool.
Let's see. I forget how long. Are we going an hour for this? Oh, it doesn't say. Okay, so we have, I think, about 20 minutes left. Does that sound right to you, Ayu? Okay. So, we do have a whole section about how to set up your project here. It's called Getting Practical. I don't necessarily want to go through that, but this is like a step-by-step guide for getting set up with all of the things that we talked about today. So if you are interested, you can go ahead and check that out. And if you have questions, let us know. We're happy to answer any questions there. If you want to pair up to set up your project, let me know, and I'll make sure that we can, whether I pair up with you or I find someone to pair up with you if you want to set up a project. But I think one of my favorite chapters here is on maintainer power-ups. And we talked about some of these things, but I think that sometimes maintainer power-ups, it might seem like, oh, this is too much. I don't need this information now. I'm just starting a project. But it's useful to know it because if you are an open source maintainer or you find yourself inheriting a project, these things will be incredibly helpful. So I think it's worth just doing an overview and answering any questions. So, Ayu, do you want to talk through GitHub Actions?
Yeah, sure. One of the maintainer power apps that is really helpful is GitHub Actions. So, for example, in I want to say guestbook in the guestbook repository in at open source, like we have GitHub Actions to welcome new contributors, and then we also have the actions to like the semantics one, I think. That's to remind them if they forgot to include the how do you say it, the link issues, and if they forgot to include as well the title of the pull request, for example, because it's something that especially new contributors keep forgetting to link their issues in their pull request templates, and it's something that we continuously reminding them about. So we set up the GitHub Actions for that, and it's really, really, really helpful. And you can set up like there are many types of actions. There are linter and then deployed previews like the Netlify that we have also in Virtual Coffee. And then, as I mentioned, the issue and pull request scripts. And then there's also code scanning tools and testing. So you want to have the actions based on the needs of your projects. To create and customizing the actions, you can go ahead to the official documentation on GitHub.
Yeah, so just to go a little bit deeper into what Ayu said on some of these things. So again, this is one of those things you do not have to know how to do yourself. There's also there's actually a GitHub Actions marketplace on GitHub, but you can copy and paste from other people. And actually, I have in my GitHub README an action that updates my README with all my latest blog posts. And I just copied that from Nick Taylor, who's another Virtual Coffee member. And so you can see here, like this welcome one is nice because it provides a little bit of a personalized touch, but it's still automated. So you'll see like there are specific things here, but if there's a PR that's opened, then it gives them this message. And so we say like, thank you for for making your first pull request. So it uses the first interaction. So it checks like, is this the first time this person has created a pull request on this repository? And thanks for taking the time to improve open source. Say hello by joining the conversation in our community. So actually, I think I can show you this in action. I just had a first PR, so you can just see what it looks like. Give me 1 second. Actually, this action is a little outdated, but so I created this PR in our Pizza CLI repository for work, which I had never contributed to before, but this is what the action looks like. And this is the outdated one. It says, say hello by joining the conversation in our Discord. You can see like we have updated it. But this is what it will look like. It checked to see, okay, I'm a first-time contributor. Now it's going to leave me that message. And you talked about some of the compliance ones. And so this one says, in order to be considered for merging, the pull request description must refer to a specific issue. So again, this actually will help this triage issues or PRs by or to review PRs by catching some of the things that you know needs to be done. This is the same thing. If someone tries to push to your main branch or whatever whatever you're using, it lets them know like, hey, you can't just push to main. You have to follow some other guidelines there. So if you need other examples of GitHub Actions, let me know. Or if you have a cool GitHub action that you know about, let us know that as well. So different types of actions. Okay, you talked through some of these things as well. Creating and customizing actions. So that gives a little bit more information. Leveraging GitHub Actions to bring CI/CD deployment to your workflow. We're getting really close on time, so I'm going to just kind of go through a little bit more quickly. The GitHub CLI I have found to be super useful for reviewing PRs. And so we have, this allows you actually to do, let me go back to the guest book. So we have a lot of PRs in here, but so if I wanted to review this PR, for example, I can just go here and then I can check this out with the GitHub CLI, and then I can have that running to test it locally on my machine in under a minute. There are a lot of different things that you can do with the GitHub CLI. You can create a repository, you can create issues, you can create PRs, tons of different things. I literally think they might have 1,000 different commands. But this is how I primarily use it, and it makes my workflow much more simple than otherwise having to check out their branch and see what's going on. We talked about issue and pull request templates. Saved replies is one of my favorite things as well. I do want to talk through what a saved reply is.
Okay, so sometimes you repeatedly write the same reply to issues or pull requests. For example, in the guest book, I had to remind contributors like to, hey, can you fix the title? Or, hey, can you link the issue and things like that. That would be repeat. I have to do it like multiple times in a day. Depends on the PRs, of course. But with the saved replies, I'm saving these replies on the GitHub. So I only need to like click the save reply, and then I will have like all this message that I need to tell the contributors, and then yeah, just send it. So that's that, and that's one of my favorite tools as well.
Yeah, that saves us a ton of time. Especially so a couple of things to remember. So to create a saved reply, you can go to add a comment. I don't know why that keeps taking me to the top, but then click saved replies, and then you can create a new saved reply there. Now, I believe it's on a repository basis, so that won't transfer to any of your other projects or repositories. So you'll have to create it for each repository individually. But you can go ahead and create that saved reply. Another thing that's worth noting is that sometimes it's useful to create the saved reply, but to personalize it a little bit more afterwards. So maybe you'll say like, hey, exclamation point, thanks for your contribution, but you forgot to include the issue. Then when you're actually sending it, say like, hey, Bekah, thanks for your thing, but you forgot to create the issue. And that just kind of creates a little bit of a better experience. But again, that's up to you to decide. But saved replies are a lifesaver. Now, code owners, actually at Open Sauce, we're releasing a new feature for code owners next week. But the code owners file is really important. it can be really important if you're working with people on a team and you want to be notified when someone submits a pull request. And so when they submit their pull request, then it will automatically notify whoever is in the code owner's file that there's a pull request that's waiting to be reviewed. And this makes sure that pull requests don't sit there for a long time. Now, you can set it up so that different teams are notified. So at OpenSauce, like we have our documentation team. And so that's me and Ayu. And so when somebody submits to our documentation repository, we're automatically notified. And we need 2 people approving the PRs to get it merged into our main branch. And so this ensures that both of us are on the same page and that we know that there's something waiting for us. Although sometimes I like get lost and I miss it. And I always like, hey, did you forget about that? And I'm like, yes, I'm sorry. So that happens. Don't worry. At OpenSauce, we have a CLI where we're releasing a feature that actually looks at all the files in a repository and the top 3 people who have contributed to those files. And then it creates a code owner's file that has them. So it kind of identifies the experts for you, and then it will label them so they are notified. So yeah, I think that is the end of the power up section. We have about 5 minutes left, and I would love to know if there are any questions.
Is that amazing tool that you just spoke about open source?
Let me.
It is pretty
Oh.
darn cool. Scans for the top contributors and makes code owners. That is so smart.
Yeah, so it is in our generate code owners file. So we
Man,
are
cool.
technically releasing this on Monday, but it's good to go. So if you check it out, or if you have questions, like I'm happy to answer any of those questions, or to do a demo for you. But this is my teammate John, and he does a little demo here if you're interested.
I'm totally interested. This is super amazing. And it's called Pizza CLI. Can I order pizza with the CLI?
So somebody must have used ChatGPT to generate
Yeah.
documentation, because the key words were like order pizza with a CLI. I was like, no, you cannot
Such
order
a good
pizza with
name.
this CLI. But there's some inspiration for a Hacktoberfest project. So somebody can create a CLI that allows you to order pizza.
This is brilliant. Wow, thanks for sharing this.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And if there are questions that you want to ask, feel free. Thank you all for being here. Again, we're happy to answer more questions. Thank you, Ayu, so much for agreeing to do this with me and for working so hard on the course. There's so much valuable information there. And we just kind of like touched the tip of it. So feel free to check out the course and ask us any questions, or if you want to walk through creating your own project, we are totally happy to do that with you. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
This is great. Thank you.